Hi guys, James back with another video, and this is one that I've been planning on doing for a while, and then it fell apart and kind of morphed into another list, but I managed to circle back and find some others that I could fill it out with. And so if you clicked on, this is the top 10 body horror films. Body horror would be something like the Hellraiser films, where it's like a lot of the horror is related to mutilation or something being involved with the body. But the body is an inherent part of the horror aspect of the film. Excuse me. So, without further ado, let's start with number 10. Number 10 is a film from 1986. It's a film by Stuart Gordon called From Beyond. Have you heard of Stuart Gordon? He did several sci-fi films in the 80s and 90s. Most notably was Reanimator. Well, this was one he did 86. I want to say this was after Reanimator. I want to say it was after Reanimator or just before. It was around that time because it also starred Jeffrey Combs. Also starred Barbara Crampton, and essentially this one had to deal with scientists discovering the pineal gland, something up here that would lead to the ultimate, sort of like your third eye, that would lead to the ultimate in sexual pleasure or whatever. I remember seeing it when I was younger, and just it was so messed up. It had images haunting my brain for several decades. Then I managed to find the special edition re-released DVD of it, and yeah, it shows its age, but it's still as messed up as I remember. And I ended up trading it away, and it ended up being worth a lot. Finding out it was worth a lot after I got rid of it, but it's a strange one. If you can find it, give it a watch. If you can find the uncut version. I didn't notice that much difference, but it is a strange sci-fi body horror movie. So that was number 10. Let me see. Number 9. Number 9 from 1988 would be I don't know how many versions of this film they've done, but this is my favorite, and the only one I've seen was The Blob, 1988. And this is the one that mostly starred Kevin Dillon. And this is just another one where something from space crashes into the ground. This little organism emerges and begins to eat and consume everything around it, and it gets bigger and bigger the more it does. But it also it's like an acid touch. Something that touches it will burn, like it consumes a person, and then you'll see the blob move over a glass house, and you look up and you see this corpse decomposing it. It's very disgusting. But it was a pretty creepy, it's still kind of creepy, but it was a pretty scary film for its day. And I thought the effects were pretty good. Were really good for its day as well. So this version, the 1988 version, directed by Chuck Russell, of The Blob. Okay. Number 8, we have a film from 1973 called Sssss. That's what it is. There's several S's and an exclamation point. It's called Sssss. And this movie doesn't really have any actors you'd recognize. But essentially, inhaled some pop. Essentially, it's this doctor who hires a kid under false pretenses to participate in some experiments with snake venom, but essentially he plans to turn the guy into a snake. Sort of like what Kevin Smith did with Tusk, but completely different. Like, he's not holding them captive. They're doing experiments together and stuff. It just happens to be his end goal that the guy isn't aware of. His body's starting to change, and things are happening to him he doesn't understand. It's not exactly against his will but there's an ulterior motive. And when I watched it years later, because I'd seen it on TV, when I watched it again years later, it was still the same movie I remembered, but there's a part at the end where it seems like they ran out of money and just went, we need a special effect. Okay, I don't have any money left. Do this. It's just like, oh, come on! You had this great lead up, and you do that. So, if you can forgive the ending, then yeah, I don't think you'll be disappointed by the rest of it. So, number 8. Number 7, we have a film from 2005, and it is Return of the Living Dead, Rave to the Grave. And it is also known as Return of the Living Dead 5, Rave from the Grave. And I've seen 1, 2, 3, and 5. I haven't seen 4, Return of the Living Dead Necropolis. 1 is okay, 2 is pretty funny, 3 has Melinda Clark in it, and it is a decent film. Like I said, I didn't see Necropolis. This one I had the most fun with, because this is where the zombie toxin, tetrotoxin or whatever it is, that causes the zombies to go back from the dead, gets let out at a rave. And so it starts infecting everyone and zombies everywhere and stuff. But as the movie itself is pretty cheesy, pretty entertaining, pretty cheesy, but at the same time the movie's going on, this one corpse, this zombie, busts out of this metal oil drum in the bottom of this basement of this lab, and starts walking away, walking up the stairs. All this stuff's going on, and then it'll cut to this zombie walking down the hall, walking up the steps, walking outside. And the movie ends with, and it's not a spoiler, the movie ends with it walking down the side of the highway and holding up a sign like rave or bust. He's trying to get to the rave so he can eat a bunch of people. And then nobody's pulling over, so he's walking away in the sun. It's hilarious. And it's just like, I'd still find the movie pretty entertaining without it, but just having that as like a side story going on just made the movie for me. Number 7, Return of the Living Dead 5, Rave to the Grave. Number 6, we have a film from 1989 directed by George P. Cosmatos called Leviathan. And this was out around the same time as another film called Deep Star 6, but between the two of them, I think this was the better one. This one, you've got Peter Weller, Richard Crenna, Ernie Hudson, Daniel Stern as the main actors you'd recognize. And this is essentially a deep sea diving operation, and they find this old Russian sub that they're going to salvage or investigate. And they don't find much on there, just that nobody's alive. They find this safe, and in the safe is this flask of vodka. Well, the one guy pockets it to keep it for himself because he didn't find anything else. Well, he drinks it, shares a drink with another woman when they're in bed, and all of a sudden the next thing you see is they're dead and writhing around, and their bodies are merging, and they merge into this monster. This monster keeps killing and consuming and growing and growing and growing, sort of like the Blob. And it'll be last man standing. See if you can get out, destroy the thing, and get your ass up to the surface. That's the movie in a nutshell, and I thought it was well done. Pretty creepy undersea horror film. Leviathan. Number 5, a film from 2013, directed by Alexander Aja, called Horns. This is the one that's based on Joe Hill novel. Joe Hill is actually Stephen King's son, but he goes by Joe Hill. And this one stars Daniel Radcliffe, Juno Temple, and Daniel Radcliffe one day wakes up and he has these horns growing out of his head. And he can hear, or not hear, but everyone who he comes in contact with just tells him the unfiltered truth about what they want to say and confess their sins and all that stuff like that. It's a very strange, unique, and sometimes hilarious film. And I thought Daniel Radcliffe, who always does a good job, another guy who, outside of the Harry Potter movies, is an outstanding actor. Just watch the film Imperium to be convinced of that. And yeah, it's just like over the course of the movie, his horns are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. He thinks he's cursed. He thinks he's turning into a demon, and what'll happen? So that is Horns. Okay, number 4, we have a film from 2016, a Canadian film directed by Cody Callahan called Let Her Out. And not sure that you would recognize a lot of the cast, but it's essentially this one girl who, after an accident, she begins to experience blackouts and hallucinations. It's sort of like things are happening without her control. And there's almost like there's another entity inside her that wants to get out and is controlling her life when she's blacked out and stuff like that. And the movie's called Let Her Out because at some point there is a fight that happens between basically her and her inner self, a literal fight. And this was recommended to me by my friend Rob, who I do the Movie Madhouse podcast with. And yeah, it's an impressive Canadian film. Let Her Out. Right, number 3, we have a film from 2013 called Blood Glacier. Another one I found on Google Play, but I was aware of this film before because we used to advertise in the theater here in Chatham. It was like Most Wanted Mondays. The films by request or fan request or whatever, or foreign films, the limited release and stuff like that, horror films in limited release, that bigger theaters like Windsor and London and Toronto would show, but not us. And there was a series where they showed The Battery, that zombie film I talked about, indie films kind of. Cabin Fever, Patient Zero, the third Cabin Fever movie that sort of ignored the second one and it was sort of like a prequel to Cabin Fever. And this was another one, Blood Glacier. And it's an Austrian film, but Austrian horror film, but it's an indie film too. Apparently it premiered at TIFF. And this is sort of like scientists working up in the Alps and discover this cave that it's sort of bleeding down this glacier, and things that come in contact with this red liquid, blood kind of thing, this blood glacier, sort of it infects them, gets inside them, turns it into a hybrid organism that's going to bust out of their chest and monsters and stuff like that. So it's sort of like a Arctic snow horror film kind of thing, but it involves the body and like being infected and stuff like that. So that's why it's on this list. Nobody you'd really recognize because it's a foreign film, but I thought it deserved a place on this list. Number 2, film from 2014 called Clown, directed by John Watts. I believe it was the second film after Cop Car, or before Cop Car. It was the films he did before he got the job directing the Spider-Man films, the Tom Holland Spider-Man films. He did Cop Car, he did Clown. And this was sort of, they made a fan film or a fan trailer called Clown, where this guy puts on this clown costume for a kid's birthday party, and then he finds he can't take it off. And it's because he can't ever take it off. It's becoming part of him. He's being turned into this demonic clown. Well, they actually turned it into a film produced by Eli Roth. He helped get it made. And John Watts directed it, and that's exactly what it is. He starts turning into this demonic clown, and he has to find a way to get it off of him or stop himself before he turns into a full-fledged demon. And it's an impressive film. Not anything like the Spider-Man films he's directed, but it's an impressive film. But he's very diverse, like Cop Car, Clown, and then the Spider-Man films. That's some range he's got there. So it's no wonder they chose him for the Spider-Man Homecoming job, which grew from there. Clown. All right, number 1, we have a film from 2007, a film called Teeth. Now, if you've never heard of this film, apparently in the world of this film, there's this phenomenon called vagina dentata, where this girl in the film develops these teeth in her vagina. And the body horror part of the film becomes she tries to have sex with a guy, and she ends up biting his member off from down there. And it's essentially what the film is, and she's trying to come to grips with it. And she also has this strained, somewhat pseudo-incestuous relationship with her stepbrother. And yeah, so I'll leave it at that. It's a good movie with a strange concept, but a strange, unique concept, but still a good movie. So that's why it's number 1. Teeth. All right, that is the end of another list. So I hope you stick around to check out the next one and the ones before it. So until then, toodles.